The pounding started before my brain did. Deep, metallic knocks that didn't sound like a neighbor and didn't sound like a delivery. It sounded like authority, like someone had decided I didn't get to sleep in my own house anymore. I sat bolt upright in bed, heart already sprinting. For a second, I didn't know what day it was. Then I saw the faint gray light leaking through the blinds and the clock on my nightstand. Just after 6 a.m., my throat felt thick like I'd swallowed cotton. I pulled on a sweatshirt and stepped into the hallway, careful with my footsteps out of habit, like the house might wake up and scold me for existing. The pounding came again, followed by a male voice. "Sheriff's office, open the door." My hands went cold instantly. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. And I moved the way you move when you've learned that panic makes you sloppy, and sloppy becomes a story other people tell about you later. I flipped the porch light on and looked through the peephole. A deputy sheriff stood on my front step in a tan uniform with a black vest, one hand holding a clipboard of papers. Behind him, his patrol car sat at the curb with its lights off, like he'd decided not to wake the whole street. Then I saw them. Across the street, half in shadow, my parents stood near the neighbor's mailbox like spectators at a parade. My mother's arms were folded. My father's hands were in his coat pockets. They weren't surprised to see a deputy on my porch. They were satisfied. I opened the door with the chain still on. "Ma'am," the deputy said, calm but firm. "Are you Tessa Ward?" "Yes," I replied. He glanced down at the papers. "I'm Deputy Romero with the county sheriff's office. I'm here regarding a writ of possession. It's an eviction order." The word eviction hit my chest like a shove. "This is my house," I said. My voice didn't shake because I didn't allow it. "There has to be a mistake." Deputy Romero didn't react. He'd heard that sentence 100 times and probably hated what came after it every single time. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm not here to debate ownership. I'm here to execute a court order." I stared at the page in his hand. My name was printed on it in clean black letters like I was a tenant who'd missed rent, not the person who paid the taxes, replaced the roof shingles, and planted the tree out back with my grandfather when I was a teenager. My mother called from across the street loud enough to carry. "You should have done what family asked," my father added, voice flat like a verdict. "Pack. This is happening today." Deputy Romero's eyes flicked toward them, then back to me. He lowered his voice a fraction. "Do you have somewhere you can go?" he asked. The question wasn't kind. It was procedural, but it still made my stomach twist. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "Not until you show me what this is." He lifted the top page slightly and angled it so I could read without stepping outside. There it was in bold. Writ of possession. A case number underneath, a court seal, a judge's signature I didn't recognize. My pulse tried to climb. I held it down. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask my parents why because I already knew the answer. They didn't need a reason that made sense. They only needed a reason that sounded acceptable to strangers. I pointed to the line near the top. "Who filed this?" Deputy Romero's gaze followed my finger. He hesitated just long enough to tell me the answer mattered. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "the plaintiff on this case is—" He stopped mid-sentence, looked back at the paperwork, then looked at me again, and his face changed. Not shock, not pity, recognition. Like someone had just realized the villain was standing in plain sight. He cleared his throat once and said, "It was filed by Diane Ward and Mark Ward." My parents didn't even pretend to be embarrassed. My mother's chin lifted like she was proud of the line being read out loud. I felt something go still inside me. A clean, cold stillness. Because if the plaintiff was my parents, that meant they hadn't just threatened me. Yeah, they'd gone into a courthouse and turned themselves into the story's reasonable side. And if there was a writ, it meant they'd already gotten a judgment. Without me. I kept my voice level. "When was this case filed?" Deputy Romero checked the page. "Judgment was entered last week." Last week. My mouth went dry. I'd been here last week. I'd gone to work, come home, watered the plants, slept in this bed. I hadn't been in court. I hadn't been served anything. No deputy at my door, no certified mail, no taped notice on my window. Where was I served? I asked. Deputy Romero looked down again, and this time his pause was heavier. He ran his thumb down a section, scanning. Service address listed is 128 Maple Terrace. I didn't answer because my brain was already refusing the reality. Maple Terrace was not my address. And it wasn't any address I'd had in my adult life. It was the little rental my parents had lived in 15 years ago before they moved up. The place with the cracked driveway and the mailbox that leaned like a tired tooth. A place I hadn't set foot in since high school. That's not my address, I said calmly. That's not where I live. Deputy Romero's jaw tightened slightly. He didn't say I know, he said, it's what's on the return of service. My mother called out again, sweeter now, like she was performing for the deputy. Oh, we tried to do this the easy way, Tessa. You forced us. I didn't look at her. I looked at Deputy Romero. Can you show me the return of service? I asked. He flipped a page back, careful. Ma'am, I can show you what I have. He angled it so I could read. A line stating service had been completed. A signature, signed a date, a time, and a description that made my skin go cold. Substitute service accepted by adult female occupant at Maple Terrace. Adult female occupant, Maple Terrace. My parents had used an address they controlled and claimed someone accepted papers on my behalf. I slowly looked across the street. My mother stared back at me with a calm, practiced face, like she'd already rehearsed how this day would go. And in that moment, I understood the real purpose of the eviction. It wasn't just to humiliate me, it was to rush me, force me to pack, leave, lose control of the house, make me too scattered to fight in time. Because if I didn't get a judge to stop this, a deputy sheriff would legally remove me from the home my grandfather left me. I swallowed once, keeping my voice low. This house was my grandfather's, I said to Deputy Romero. He left it to me. Deputy Romero didn't argue. He simply held the papers tighter, like he hated being the delivery system for other people's cruelty. Ma'am, he said, if you believe the court order was obtained improperly, you need to contact the court immediately and file an emergency motion. I can't tell you how to do that. I nodded once. I understand. He glanced back down, then up, and his voice turned even more careful. There's one more thing, he said. This writ authorizes same-day possession. My stomach tightened. Same day? He looked me straight in the eye, professional and not unkind. Without a judge's stay, he said. I have to clear this house by noon. I didn't stand there arguing with a deputy at my door. Arguing would have given my parents what they wanted, a scene, a story, and a reason to point and say I was unstable. So I did the only thing that mattered. I built a record. I asked Deputy Romero to hold the paperwork steady while I took clear photos of every page. The case number, the court seal, the signature line, the service address, the return of service language. Then I stepped back inside, shut the door gently, and slid the deadbolt into place like it could buy me time. It couldn't, but documentation could. Through the window, I could still see my parents across the street, watching like they were waiting for me to start throwing boxes onto the lawn. My mother had that same satisfied stillness she used to wear when she thought she'd cornered me into obedience. I didn't give her the satisfaction of movement. I grabbed my wallet, my keys, my phone, and one small fireproof pouch from the drawer where I kept the boring things that become life or death when other people decide to get creative. My deed copy, my grandfather's probate distribution letter, the property tax statements, and the homeowner's policy in my name. Then I called the courthouse clerk's office while I was still standing in my own kitchen. The line rang twice. Civil Division, a woman answered, voice brisk. I have a writ of possession for an eviction, I said calmly. I was never served. I need to know how to request an emergency stay and set aside a default. There was a pause. Keys clicking, the kind of pause that meant she'd pulled the case number, and was deciding how much mercy the system was willing to offer at 6 in the morning. "What's the case number?" she asked. I read it off the page. She typed again. I longer this time. Then her voice changed, just slightly less scripted. "Ma'am," she said, "this is an unlawful detainer filed by Mark and Diane Ward. Default judgment entered last week." "I was never served," I repeated. "The service address listed is Maple Terrace. That's not my address." Another pause. More keys. "I see the return," she said carefully. "It says substitute service accepted by an adult female occupant." "That would be my mother," I said, and my voice stayed even because if I let myself feel the rage, I'd lose time. "What do I do right now?" "You need to file an emergency motion to stay enforcement," she said, "and a motion to vacate the default." "How fast can that be heard?" I asked. She hesitated. "Depends on the judge's calendar." "It has to be heard today," I said. "No, the deputy says he has to clear the house by noon." The clerk exhaled quietly like she didn't like what she was about to say, but she was going to say it anyway. "Come to the courthouse as soon as we open," she said. "Bring identification and proof of your address. Bring any evidence you were not served. And if you have proof you own the property, bring that too." "I do," I said. "Okay," she replied. "And ma'am, don't delay. If the writ is executed, it becomes harder." Harder meant the kind of harder that destroys people financially and then calls it procedure. I ended the call, grabbed the pouch, and walked back to my front door. Deputy Romero was still on my porch, waiting with the patience of a man who didn't enjoy his job. My parents were still across the street, unmoving. I opened the door again with the chain on. "I'm going to the courthouse," I told the deputy. "I'm filing an emergency stay." He nodded once. "That's what you need to do." My mother called out sweet as poison. "You can file whatever you want. It's already done." Deputy Romero's jaw tightened at her tone, but he didn't respond. He just looked at me. "Ma'am," he said, lower, "I'm not allowed to give legal advice, but I can tell you this. If you get a signed stay order, you call our civil unit immediately. They'll instruct me not to execute." "I understand," I said. "Can you give me the civil unit number?" He hesitated, then wrote it on the corner of a card and slid it toward the crack in the door. My father finally spoke again, louder this time. "Pack your things. Don't make this ugly." I met his gaze across the street and kept my voice quiet. You made it ugly when you lied to a judge," I said. My mother's face tightened, but she smiled anyway, like she thought my words didn't matter anymore. I closed the door without giving them another line. Then I left through the back door, walked around the fence, and got into my car without having to pass them like they owned the sidewalk. On the drive to the courthouse, the sky brightened into that pale morning color that makes everything look harmless. My hands were steady on the wheel. My mind wasn't. I kept thinking about Maple Terrace, about my parents signing for papers meant for me, and then pretending the court had served me. About how easily a lie becomes a judgment when you don't know you're supposed to show up. When the courthouse doors opened, I was already there. The building smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. The security guard at the metal detector looked half asleep until I set the writ paperwork on the tray and said, "I have an eviction being executed today." His eyes sharpened. He waved me through faster than anyone else in line. Upstairs, the civil division counter had a thin queue of people holding folders the way drowning people hold air. I waited my turn without fidgeting, because every movement felt like it could be interpreted. When I reached the window, I slid my ID and the writ photos forward. "I need an emergency stay and a motion to vacate," I said. "I was never served. The service address is wrong." The clerk, a man with tired eyes and a badge clipped to his collar, typed my case number and frowned almost immediately. "You're at this address?" he asked, reading from the file. "No," I said. "That address is my parents' old place. I've never lived there as an adult." He clicked again, pulled up a scanned document, and turned his monitor slightly so I could see. A proof of service form with a signature line and a description of the adult female occupant who allegedly accepted papers. My stomach tightened. The signature was a scribble, but the handwriting on the printed name underneath was neat. Diane Ward. My mother hadn't even bothered to hide it. She signed for it, I said quietly. The clerk's eyebrows rose a fraction. She is the plaintiff. Yes, I replied. And she accepted service on my behalf at an address I don't live at. He stared at the screen for a beat longer than he needed to, and then he did something that told me he wasn't just going through motions. He printed the service form and slid it under the glass. Highlight that, he said low. It matters. I took the paper with hands that stayed steady because I refused to let the system label me emotional. I also own the house, I said, and I slid out the deed copy from my fireproof pouch along with the probate distribution letter. My grandfather's name at the top, my name listed as the recipient of the property. The clerk looked at the deed and blinked. Then he typed again, faster. Your parents filed this as landlords, he said, voice tightening. They're claiming you're a tenant holding over. A tenant, I repeated, keeping my tone flat. He clicked to another scanned exhibit and turned the monitor again. A one-page rental agreement. My name typed at the top. My parents' names typed under landlord. A signature at the bottom that was supposed to be mine. It wasn't. When it looked like someone had tried to copy my handwriting from an old birthday card and got bored halfway through. They forged it, I said. The clerk didn't say yes. Clerks don't say yes. He said, if you want the judge to see this today, you need to file your emergency motion now. I can give you the forms and a hearing request slip. He handed me a packet through the slot, thick, stapled, still warm from the printer. The words emergency motion to stay sat at the top like a life preserver. What judge? I asked. He checked the docket. Judge Halprin is assigned. Can I get in front of her this morning? I said. He hesitated, then glanced over his shoulder toward an interior door that said, Judicial Assistant. I can try, he said, but you need to understand. I understand. I cut in gently. If I don't get a stay, a deputy clears my house by noon. The clerk nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and took my packet back for a stamp. The stamp came down hard. Thunk, ink, bleeding into paper. A sound that made it real. He slid the stamped motion back to me. Go to Department 14, he said. Ask the assistant for an emergency slot. I turned to leave, but he added quieter. Ms. Ward. I looked back. He nodded toward the deed in my hand. If that deed is recorded in your name, your parents' eviction case has a standing problem. Judges don't like standing problems. I didn't thank him like he'd done me a favor. I thanked him like he'd handed me a weapon I knew how to use. In the hallway outside Department 14, I sat on a wooden bench and filled out the motion with slow, clean handwriting. Not rushed, not shaky. Every line deliberate. And when I reached the section that asked for supporting evidence, I listed exactly what the record already showed. Wrong address. Plaintiff signed service. Forged lease. Recorded deed in my name. Then I stood and walked to the assistant's window and slid my packet under the glass. The assistant read the first page, then the second. Then her eyes stopped on the proof of service. Her face changed. Not dramatic. Just alert. She looked up at me. You're saying the plaintiff accepted service on behalf of the defendant? Yes, I said. She stared at me for a long second, then stood up without another word and disappeared through the door behind her. I waited, hands folded, breathing steady, listening to muffled voices inside the judge's chambers. When the door opened again, the assistant returned holding my packet like it was suddenly heavier. She leaned toward the window and spoke quietly. Judge Halprin will see you, she said. But I need to warn you, your parents attached one more document to their filing. And if it's what it looks like, this isn't just an eviction. My stomach tightened. What document? The assistant swallowed once. A deed, she said. A recorded deed that claims the house was transferred back to them. My body went cold, but my face stayed still. A deed, I repeated quietly. Transferred back to them. The assistant nodded once, eyes cautious. It's in the court file as an exhibit. You'll see it when you're in front of the judge. I didn't argue in the hallway. I didn't demand to see it through the glass like a frantic person. I simply nodded and said, "Yes, thank you." Then I followed her through the door into Department 14. The courtroom was smaller than the lobby below, dimmer, quieter, built for decisions that ruin people politely. A few attorneys sat scattered in the benches with laptops open. A man in a wrinkled suit stared at his hands like he was waiting to be punished. And then I saw my parents. They were seated near the front with a lawyer beside them. A man with silver hair and a calm posture, the kind of attorney people hire when they want the court to assume they're the reasonable ones. My mother wore a soft cardigan and a concerned expression like she'd come to rescue me from myself. My father stared straight ahead, jaw set. They didn't look nervous. They looked prepared. When my mother spotted me, she gave a small, sad smile, like she was about to perform compassion, and I didn't return it. The bailiff called the case number, and we approached the tables. Judge Halprin took the bench and immediately looked down at the file with a frown that told me she'd already seen something she didn't like. "Good morning," she said. "We have an emergency motion to stay enforcement of a writ of possession. Ms. Ward, you're the defendant?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. "And you're appearing without counsel today?" "Yes." Her gaze flicked briefly to my parents' attorney. "Counsel?" "Lawrence Pike for the plaintiffs, Your Honor." Judge Halprin nodded, then looked back at me. "Ms. Ward, you understand the writ authorizes possession today?" "Yes," I said. The deputy said noon. Judge Halprin didn't react to the emotion of that. She reacted to the procedure. And tell me why I should issue an emergency stay. I slid my packet forward, hands steady. Because I was never properly served. The proof of service shows the plaintiff accepted substitute service at an address I do not live at. The address is not mine. And the plaintiff signed the service form. Judge Halprin's eyes narrowed slightly. Plaintiff signed the service form. "Yes," I said. Mr. Pike smiled faintly, like he was about to explain away a technicality. Judge Halprin looked at him. "Counsel, is that accurate?" Mr. Pike stood, voice smooth. "Your Honor, service was completed according to statute,